freaking prune juice, man.
Well, let's hopefully not see the explosive effects of the prune juice on camera.
If it is gonna happen, it's gonna be in your face. So all they're gonna see is just you suddenly not looking so good.
Well, that would instantly turn me into a meme, shall it? Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome back to Super Kaiju Binge.
Yeah, I pulled Grandpa's finger meme.
And oh god, this ain't gonna be a pretty one for you guys today, at least for me and the host. Today we will be discussing the 1961 British Boar Fest. Just gonna throw it out there, right then and now. Today we'll be discussing Gorgo. And joining me today is fellow reviewer Trevor Thompson from Trevor Thompson. Say hello.
Howdy, everybody.
Okay, I better catch up with you.
He's
So yeah, Gorgo. I can make it better. Yeah, Gorgo. Came out in 1961. It was Britain's take on the Godzilla stereotype. And I believe this is the only time we will ever get a repeat non-Japanese director in Super Kaiju Binge. With Eugene Laurie, the same guy who directed The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. This is actually the third monster movie that Eugene Laurie did. What was the second one, Trev?
The Giant Behemoth, 1958, but released in America in 59.
Which I have not seen, though I do know that it pretty much just is like a diet version of The Beast in 20,000 Fathoms.
Actually, of these three movies, it's probably my favorite. I really like the atmosphere in that one.
Well, I haven't seen it. Maybe if I ever do like an addendum series of Super Kaiju Binge where I get my hands on a lot of quote-unquote classics like Giant Behemoth and Reptilicus and Yongari, Monster from the Deep, I'll do those. But today we're talking about his third and final monster movie, the only one that was ever in color, Gorgo. Not really much to say production-wise, except Gorgo was made to be pretty much just a big homage to Godzilla. It has kind of a similar formula. The title monster has a very similar appearance, an aquatic reptilian dinosaur thing that goes on a rampage through a city. You happy now? Oh, it tastes like Chinese food. So, yeah, Gorgo was released to, I guess, kind of mixed reviews, I guess.
I've actually never really looked at the reviews. It just, it seems like this is a pretty big fan favorite from that era, oddly enough.
Yeah, this movie has quite a big fan, like a kind of a big cult following, which explains why it was such perfect cannon fodder for Brendan Tenold on Brendan's Cult Movie Reviews. But yeah, this movie has quite a dedicated fan base. And I've seen a lot of people in the kaiju community say that they're fans of this movie. I've seen others that say they didn't care for it, like Andres Perez from Kaiju Noir kind of had mixed thoughts on it. And Adam Noyes from AN Productions calls it a boring movie, which I almost hate to say this, but yeah, I agree. I'm not really going to be sugarcoating my opinion on this one. This was the first movie in Super Kaiju Binge that I really kind of was not looking forward to watching. And I literally just got done watching it about an hour before I started this video. Not a big fan of this one. I'm not gonna lie. This movie I think is just really kind of dull. So that being said, Trev, what's your personal history with this film?
Very brief. I think my earliest memory of hearing about this was I was reading a Modeler's Resource magazine, which went over various model kits for the genre, and there was a little review for I think the soundtrack. This was a while ago, I think in like 2001, so this thing is probably long out of print. But anyway, that's like the first time I saw something from it. And then when I got on the internet later on, whenever I would Google monster movies, this would come up often in the recommends. And I gave a look at the Google images, and it looked pretty neat. And I was reading about it, and Nick already kind of got into it, but there is definitely a fairly strong cult following for this movie. And I'm thinking that it's probably a generational thing, because I think this is most of the people who really like it are older, and they were probably kids whenever it first came out.
Yeah.
I know that Steven Spielberg has actually mentioned that he's a fan of this movie. So it was probably one of those that he saw whenever he was younger. But yeah, anyway, I finally saw the movie probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago, so it wasn't that long ago. I got the fairly recent anniversary release, I believe it is, and I watched it, and I think I'm probably going to be about on the same page as Nick here. Maybe not so indulgent in disgust or anything, but it is kind of meh. So yeah, that's my history.
So my personal history, kind of like with Trevor, I would research giant monster movies all throughout the decades, ever since Godzilla. And of course, Gorgo would pop up quite a bit. And I did notice that this movie kind of does have quite the cult following. And so that always kind of intrigued me. So I was thought, oh, maybe this movie isn't so bad. And I would see clips of this movie here and there. Like I remember in the Robin Williams Flubber, when the first scene when Flubber's going on a little rampage, there's a piece of it that's hitting a channel changer on a remote, and a quick clip of Gorgo would play, and that would always stick out to me. I'd be like, "Oh, hey, that's from Gorgo," but it wasn't.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
So this movie always stuck out to me, but it wasn't until 2014 when I was finally deciding to, you know what, I'm going to buy Gorgo and I'm going to check it out. So I bought it off Amazon. I think it only cost me like $11. I bought it and it showed up. I watched the first 35 minutes of the movie and I shut it off. Then about a week later, I finished the film begrudgingly, and I literally just got done watching this movie for the second time. And ironically, I woke up, started watching the movie, I shut it off exactly halfway through, did some errands, got back home, finished the movie, and then watched a more entertaining show, Bar Rescue, afterwards. If it comes off like I'm like really disgusted with this movie, I'm really not, but I'm just really, I don't get this movie's fan base. I really don't. If you're a big fan of monster movies and you just dig this movie, I can understand that, but it seems like I've seen some non-monster movies like this movie quite a bit. And so Trevor may be right. Maybe it's just a generational thing. It's one of those movies that was played on TV a lot, and it just grew its fan base there. I mean, it's cool if it does, but I really just don't get the appeal to this movie. I don't think it's all that interesting.
I think there was some expectation set from what we heard about it going in, and then when we see it, we realize, well, it doesn't meet those.
Possibly. And Ryan asks, was this intended for a parody or was it really trying to be its own thing? This was trying to be its own thing. This wasn't a parody at all. This was trying to go for a no holds barred serious monster movie that's also a Godzilla ripoff.
Yeah, serious cash in.
Now, I will say, as a Godzilla ripoff, this movie is not terrible because it doesn't really have a whole lot of it doesn't have a lot of elements from Godzilla in its plot. The only thing it bears similarity to is Gorgo itself is a giant reptilian dinosaur that roars loudly and destroys a city. Other than that, this movie rips off both King Kong and Mighty Joe Young a lot more than Godzilla because they literally called Gorgo the eighth wonder of the world.
It's not even really a rip-off of Godzilla until his mom shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No.
So with all that being said, let's just jump into the plot. The plot of this movie is really, really simple and straightforward, so this will be kind of quick. Captain Joe Ryan, played by Bill Travers, is salvaging for... One thing I will say, this is one of the very few, if not maybe only monster movies in existence to have a completely male main cast. But John Carpenter's The Thing, this movie is not. So Captain Joe Ryan is salvaging for treasure off the coast of Ireland, where Flavor goes to die, when an undersea volcano erupts, nearly sinking his vessel. Ryan and his first officer, Sam Slade, played by William Sylvester, take the ship to Nara Island for repairs. As they enter the harbor, they discover the floating carcasses of ancient marine animals, the first hint that something dangerous was awoken by the volcano eruption. Ryan and Slade consult the harbor master, who also has archaeological pretensions, and he has been salvaging the harbor as well. Some of his men have disappeared mysteriously, and it turns out that one of them has died from fright. Is that even possible?
It happens a lot in older movies, but I'm not sure if it actually is a thing.
No, like not even going into a heart attack. Like you just die from being scared. Like, That's how they play it off in movies.
I would think that the heart attack would be caused by the fright, which is, that would make sense to me.
After dark, a monstrous creature surfaces and attacks a group of fishermen, then comes ashore to wreak havoc on the island. The dinosaur-like creature is supposedly 65 feet in height, and the people of the island finally drive it off with torches? Whatever. Ryan and his crew manage to capture the monster and haul it aboard their ship, tying it to the deck. And soon, university scientists arrive from Nara hoping to collect the monster for study, but Ryan has been offered a better deal by the owner of a circus in London. When the ship arrives in London, the circus owner names it Gorgo after the snake-haired woman, the Gorgon Medusa. It is exhibited to the public in Battersea Park. The scientists examine Gorgo and conclude that he is not yet an adult and that his mom must at least be 200 feet tall. Then an even larger sea monster named Ogra attacks Nara Island and trashes the buildings, sinks a Royal Navy vessel, and is impervious to attacks from other warships. Later, Ogra, now identified as Gorgo's mother, comes ashore in London and rampages through the city, destroying buildings, including Tower Bridge, despite being bombarded by tanks and infantry and jet fighters, all having no effect, literally causing London Bridge to fall down, fall down, fall down. Having demolished her way through London, Ogra finds Gorgo and both return to the sea. And I will lovingly quote Brendan's review because this is literally the highlight of the review because the movie is so dull. Now get back into the ocean, young man. What did I tell you before? Just eat the strangers and then tell an adult. That's right. And thus the movie ends extremely anticlimactically.
Very quickly, too.
Yeah. Trev, go ahead.
This plot has potential, but it's just way too straightforward, and I'm going to save this for my cons here in a little bit, but there's other elements that work against it. So, yeah.
Same. Honestly, this is literally as bare bones a monster plot as you can fucking possibly get. It hits all the same beats of a, like, if you think of a classic 50s or 60s monster movie story, this is it. This is exactly what that is. It's like a template, a perfect template. It hits every single beat right on point at every single point, but there's no fluff. There's a little bit of potential, which we'll get into with our pros, but overall, this movie's story, it's very simple, it's very basic, it's very bare bones, and it's just not very interesting. So, Trev, what are your pros for this movie?
I have three. Number one is the creature design.
Okay.
I like the fact that Agra and Gorgo are pretty much big dino crocs, or gator crocs, your preference, I guess. But it's also kind of fairly iconic in the genre, even though it is derivative of Godzilla. Which I should also point out that John Carpenter made a not a student film, but like a home movie whenever he was a kid called Godzilla versus Gorgo. So,
which I would like to see.
What was that?
I would like to see that fight. It would be pretty simple, and you can probably guess who would be the winner, but I would like to see that, Godzilla versus Gorgo.
Oh, yeah, and I should also mention, kind of working off what we said about the plot, I think this movie has, or probably had, the time's probably long since passed, has the potential for a good remake. And actually, one of the early versions of an American Godzilla film, the one from the 80s, was actually pretty much a Gorgo remake, but they called it Godzilla. So that probably would have been a similar problem with what happened with 98, but it is interesting to point that out. So, so the creature design definitely is a highlight. The effects overall for executing the design are pretty good. Maybe there's some flimsy parts here and there, but that kind of comes with the territory of rubber suits. But yeah, so I guess Gorgo himself and his mom are a definite highlight, which is thankfully a plus.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so pro number two is the cinematography, or the look of the movie. It kind of has a Hammer-esque, very rich Technicolor look to it that's kind of some eye candy. It's not, there's some blue screen effects that aren't so great, and I'll bring that up again for my cons.
Well, this movie was shot in Technicolor.
Yes. Also, the King's brothers, who you see their names listed at the start, who produced it, they also distributed Rodan, the American version over here in the States.
Which I believe was a couple years prior.
Yes, indeed. So, yeah, the colors of this movie, even if unfortunately a lot of the plot and the characters and whatnot aren't great or super engaging, the visuals kept me watching, because I was thinking that if Hammer Films had managed to make a giant monster movie, it probably would have been something like this, hopefully better. But, yeah. All right. And last pro number three. What I wrote down was the first act is fairly engaging right up till the first scene with Gorgo, but I'm going to revise that and say that mostly it's the premise itself, which isn't delivered upon, that is interesting. The whole idea of a infant kaiju being captured and exploited, which again, King Kong, Mighty Joe Young, all that stuff. Valley of Guanji, that's another.
Yep.
There's potential there. And then, of course, they get taken to civilization, and this time around there's a rescuer who comes and bails them out. It's a plot that has potential, and it is done slightly better. I will give Adam Noyce credit for this, because I do agree with him to an extent, that Gappa, the Triphibian monster,
You gotta do that one too.
It's basically a Japanese remake of this movie, and it is slightly better, if only for the fact that the monsters have, like most Japanese kaiju movies, they have character.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess the last pro, wrapping it up, would be there's potential here. I don't think it's delivered upon, but there's potential.
Yep. It's kind of frustrating, but yep. See, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 pros. Pro number 1 is I agree that this movie is very colorful. This definitely is very, very Technicolor-y. I don't know when Technicolor was introduced to the world of cinema. I know that for some reason it went out of style in the mid-70s, and I don't know if this is true or not. But I don't know if it was the last, like definitively to be the last, but I know that the original Suspiria from 1976 or 77 was one of the last movies to ever use Technicolor. Now, I don't know if it was the very last to use Technicolor, as some people have said. But this was released in 1961, so obviously Technicolor was still wide in everyday use. And it looks really good. This movie is very, very colorful. The reds are very strikingly red. The blues are very strikingly blue. And when all the different colors in the color spectrum are on screen, they all pop out at various moments, and it looks really good. This movie is huh?
They add touches of atmosphere, like the very beginning when the volcano erupts, or later on when Agra attacks. It's the colors that really help the atmosphere of those moments. Go on.
I guess the first form of Technicolor was introduced in 1916.
I know that it started popping up more regularly in the 30s, I do believe.
Possibly. So yeah, the colors are just very vibrant in this movie, and it's very visually appealing. Yeah, that's true. So that's where the 30s comes from. Pro number 2 is Gorgo / Ogre themselves. I like their design. They're like Trev says, I'm just gonna call them they're Dino Crocs. They have the body of just a big T-Rex, kind of like an iguanodon, but they have the back scoots of a crocodile or alligator, but they also have like weird basilisk flappy ears. Which
there's some pretty neat fan redesigns on the internet out there, which again shows that there's potential for Gorgo to be brought back if somebody was interested.
Agreed, yeah. But I like this monster design. You can definitely tell that if this monster was to go up against any other adversary, it definitely would be very much so a brute force fighter, because Ogre has these large, giant arms with huge bear paw hands with giant claws on her fingers. So she definitely would be, she'd be kind of like Red King in the Ultraman franchise. She would be like a brute force slugger, tear people to pieces type fighter. And she shows off her kind of limited abilities for building destroying very well. She smacks down towers with her arms. She stomps through buildings, kind of like Godzilla in Tokyo. She fucks up the city, and she looks cool while she does it. I love Gorgo and Ogre's roar. Love it to death. It's very loud and bombastic, and it's kind of sounds like a kind of slowed down long elephant trumpet, but I think it works very well for these monster designs. I also love that they have bright red eyes.
Yeah.
I kind of makes them look a little bit creepy. Like if you were to look down, and they seem to glow. So if you were to look down into the ocean, if you were to see those, especially with Ogra, you were to see her red eyes, you'd probably shit your pants. So overall, I like Ogra, totally. Ogra and Gorgo's design. I think they're designed very well. It's just they're in a shitty movie, which is a shame. Which so like Trevor says, there's a lot of potential for a remake with this movie, and I would like to see that, but all we have is this, and it's a shame. But yeah, I like the creature designs. And the effects utilized on them are pretty decent as well. So this will lead me into... Oh, I guess I have 5. Never mind, I have 5 pros. This will lead me into pro number 3, is that the special effects in this movie are overall pretty... They're decent. I've seen better, but I've also seen worse, like Reptilicus. I actually have not seen Reptilicus. But anyway, when it comes to the effects in this movie, the best that I can say that they are is that they're decent. The miniature sets are decently made. They look good when they're destroyed, and they definitely do look like good representations of London and Britain architecture. Like London Bridge looks really good. The giant London Watchtower looks really good. Piccadilly Circus looks excellent. I don't know if that was just stock footage with Gorgo superimposed in the background, or if they actually did build a model of Piccadilly Circus and have Gorgo destroy it, but that looked really, really solid.
I think it was a blend of the two things, stock footage and actual set.
Well, if so, they pulled it off quite well. And the set that they used for little baby Gorgo's enclosure in the circus, that looks pretty decent. They're just not mind-blowing. Like, I've seen better miniature effects in other movies, and I've even seen them in like the miniatures in Rodan, and even Godzilla Raids Again. Well, I'd say Godzilla Raids Again looked about as good as this movie, but the miniatures in Rodan looked way better in that movie than in this. But here, and also the Cinemation looks fine, though you can clearly tell with Gorgo and Ogra's designs, because of the mechanisms closing the eyes and moving the mouth and the ears, that they kind of have rubber suit Batman syndrome, where they can't turn their heads. And they have really, really long, thick, and stiff necks. And it's also very obvious there's a whole bunch of holes in their necks, and that's so that the suit actors can see. Showa Godzilla does this as well, but they hid the holes in the neck way better than in this movie. There's lots and lots of shots where you can see all the breathe holes in Gorgo's suit in this movie. But so the effects aren't flawless, but they're good for what this movie tries to accomplish, except for one aspect, but Trev and I will get to that when we get to the cons. Pro number 4 is the Infancy Twist. Not really much to say about this other than it's a good twist to reveal, hey, this monster that you captured, it's only a baby. And its mama might come after it. And she does. I think that's one of the main elements that kind of sets this movie a little bit apart from the norm, despite this movie being so basic and generic. I do like that twist. I think that probably has been implemented in much better movies. I just can't think of any off the top of my head.
Oh, I have one. I don't know if this was a direct inspiration, but the monster in Cloverfield is supposed to be a baby too.
Yeah, that is true, which we'll also be discussing in Super Kaiju Binge. I think actually Trev is joining me for that too. Anyway, so yeah, I like the Infancy Twist. It is interesting, and it kind of throws you for a loop, and it makes you think, oh, you guys are screwed. And the final pro is Ogre's Rampage throughout London. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's fun to watch Ogre tear apart the tear apart the city, especially when she attacks Piccadilly Circus. In all the various ways that they try to stop her, they throw quite a bit. They throw artillery shells, bullets, bombs, tanks, missiles, electricity, which that was taken right out of the original Gojira. And nothing's stopping her. She's literally a tank, which again, I would love to see this monster go up against other monsters. Even without some kind of projectile attack, which, by the way, that's the one thing that I don't like about Gorgo, is that Gorgo and Ogre don't have breath weapons. I would have been fine even with Ogre being able just to breathe fire. If Gorgo couldn't do it because he's only a baby, that would have been fine. But I really wish Ogre would have been able to breathe fire. I think that's a big missed opportunity. But still, the monster rampage, there's really only one, because Gorgo's initial attack is very brief, and Ogre's attacking of the village, literally she stomps on 2 buildings and then goes right back into the water. There's really only one monster attack, and that's the last 20 minutes of this movie, and it's fairly entertaining. This is when the movie gets enjoyable to watch. Despite it having one kind of brief problem. This is going to sound nuts, but I think it goes on a little too long. But it's so weird because I have another major issue with this movie that you can probably kind of guess. But yeah, I think the destruction scene goes on a little bit too long. It's too bland to be 15 minutes long.
I think you beat me to it a little bit. But I have other things I want to point out.
So let's just get into the cons. Go ahead, Trev.
Oh, actually, I want to ask something. What isn't Ogre actually technically a little bit taller than the original Godzilla?
Well, technically, yes. She's stated to be about 200 feet tall, which is 60 meters is 196 feet. So let's just say she's 60 meters. The original Showa Godzilla is only 50 meters in height, which is 167 feet tall.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out while you were bringing up the stats and whatnot. Okay, so getting into my cons, I have 3 cons. There's probably going to be some levels to them, but I'll try to be brief. Con number 1, what really killed this, and I think what worked together with the fact that the plot is very straightforward, is the fact that there's very unlikable leads. One of them is a straight-up greedy bastard, in my opinion. Joe, the actor, Bill Travers, I've seen him in something else. I'm going to have to look it up and see where I've seen him before, because I was getting deja vu watching it, but he's like a total schmuck. Completely motivated by greed, and one of those guys who just adds to the problem with their situation. But, that being said, Sam, the other lead, he's not too much better, because even though he has a guilt trip later on, too little too late in my opinion, he's actually the guy who suggests that they take Gorgo back alive. So he really starts the whole mess, even though he's the less irritating of the 2 guys. So yeah, since those are the 2 leads, there's Sean, the little boy. He's fine. He didn't really bother me, but he didn't make an impression either way. He was kind of like a preachy mechanism. He was supposed to be there to point out how wrong what they were doing was, and there wasn't a whole lot of depth there. So yeah, and pretty much nobody else in the movie. There's military officials. There's the circus owner. They're all just there to
fill out the cast.
So yeah, that's a big thing working against this movie is that, and also one reason why it's hard to get through is the fact that there's nobody likable in it. So moving right along, con number 2, you actually made a pretty good case for the good parts of the effects, but I kind of lumped everything together. So I just said the effects are uneven in this movie.
Yes.
The monster effects and the miniatures are overall impressive, and they're definitely a highlight. But one practical creature effect that I thought was pretty laughable, whenever the volcano explodes at the beginning and they're swimming up to the island, or they're boating up to the island, the dead fish look pretty bad.
Yeah, I was watching the movie. I don't even remember that scene from the first time I watched this. So I was like, what the fuck is this? Oh my god, those are just like literally rubber puppets.
I mean, the idea is nice, and that's something I also should have added to that one pro that I had in my last pro, is that that setup that they have where they go to the island and everything, and the fact that the archaeologist there kind of is trying to kind of be like not a dictator, but he's trying to maintain control over that island. That's one of those interesting elements that I think could be fleshed out better in a remake.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the effects, there's lots of choppy blue screen moments. And it is blue screen because green screen didn't exist then. There's also, I noticed, like with some of the military stock footage, it's dubbed over with like lines for the movie itself.
Badly.
Whenever you're watching the stock footage, clearly the military officials are saying something else.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, overall, I just lumped all the effects things together, and while the creatures and the miniatures are also pretty good too, like the ship at the start, London later on, those are pretty good. But there's also some pretty yikes moments in here.
Oh, and the underwater props for Ogre and Gorgo look pretty terrible too.
Yeah, they're just kind of floating there.
Uh-huh.
So, last con, and again, you actually made a good case for this. I do like the destruction scene, but it does go on a bit too long, and it's really the main moment that's clearly trying to imitate the original Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is an adequate sense of dread that is almost on par with what happened in the original Gojira during the attack scene. But again, it just goes on too long, and I think why it also goes on too long is the fact that by this point, we finally get to see what we monster fans want to see. But at the same time, the journey up to this has been so dull and the characters unlikable that I think that factors into why it goes on a bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's also an element that I thought was not particularly executed well. They have a reporter in here that pops up and comments.
Oh God, I couldn't stand him.
Well, and the thing was is that the reason why Steve Martin works in Godzilla King of the Monsters 1956, the reason why he works is that in that version of the movie, he's pretty much the person that we're following.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy just really randomly pops up. I mean, I get it that reporters would start reporting once this happened, but he's given this emphasis like he's supposed to be the focus now, and it's like, who the hell is this guy?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's how I felt about it. And also, since I mentioned King of the Monsters 56, that was also pretty popular in Europe. So that might have accounted for the inspiration whenever they were doing this movie. They might have been trying to go for that. So yeah, those are all my cons.
Well, brace yourself, people, because I have a lot of cons. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cons for Gorgo. Con number 1. Not going to talk about the leads quite yet. The cast are nothing but military leads, circus folk, or not, like military officials and military personnel, circus folk, and people run away from the rampage. They're all so bland. They're so boring. They're only here just to fill out a cast and to. This is literally a paint-by-numbers monster movie, and you painted the numbers as the military official with just green, brown, and tan, because that's exactly what they are. They're that boring and they're that bland. They're just here to fill out a cast and get the plot moving and try to destroy the monster. That's it. They lack personality. They lack a sense of humor. Like, if they would have had a little bit of sense of humor, like, oi, bollocks, that's a big lizard. Like, that would have been kind of funny. But no, they just play it completely straight, and it just falls flat.
There was something unintentionally funny.
What?
The repent bomb during the attack.
Yeah, like, repent, 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 the end is near, and he just gets trampled. Like, thank you. I didn't really need that in my monster movie. It was like, shut up. Con number 2, Sean. He's just he's not quite like a kid in the Gamera movie, though he verges on it. He's just an annoying preacher, and it's really aggravating to listen to. Like, he's always going around trying to he kind of pulls a Toshio from the original Gamera. He tries to unleash Gorgo on top of a ship in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of buttfuck nowhere. Really? You're going to unleash a monster that could very easily destroy this ship? You in the process? I don't know about you, but I would have picked this kid up by the scruff of his neck and I would have tossed him over the ocean.
Well, that is what Joe said at one point, which I can't blame him there, I guess. I should also point out that Gorgo, aside from the fact that Sean was about to let him go, Gorgo's already leaving a trail for his mom to follow. So
true. That's
also an interesting element.
True. Well, that's a theory, but I mean, good a guess as any, but whatever. Sean is just a dumbass. He's annoying. He's preachy. He's not an interesting character. They kind of try to make you sympathetic and try to make you latch onto him because he seems to latch onto Joe and Sam, like two father and uncle type characters. But, and also because of the fact that he's an orphan himself, but he's just annoying. He's not very interesting. He's not very fun to watch and not very fun to listen to. He's just an annoying preacher that makes you feel bad for doing the things that you do. Fuck off. Con number 3. The main 2 male characters in this movie are very unlikable. In particular, Joe. Yeah, Sam is the one who suggests maybe we should capture this thing and have it be alive. I didn't really get the sense that he did it for money. I kind of feel like he was going to be along with those 2 scientists that would have come along to collect Gorgo for scientific study. But then Joe pops in and says, nah, we're just going to sell it into the circus business. Joe is the... Huh?
Honestly, that moment with the 2 scientists kind of pissed me off even more.
Yeah, like really, guys? Really, guys? You're going to be that unlikable? So Joe really is the one that is the most unlikable of the 2. You know what he reminds me of? He reminds me of a douchebag version of Carl Denham from the original King Kong.
I can see that for sure.
And when Sam gets a guilt trip and he finally says, hey, let's just throw Gorgo back in the ocean and let Ogra have her. Joe's like, what the hell are you guys doing? This is the 20th century. Surely we could do something to keep our prize and make us money. Like, really, dude? You're going to be one of those assholes? You're going to be like the scientist from the original Thing from Another World? This is a big threat. This could bring potentially disastrous harm to our country. And you're just going to be like, no, he's mine. He makes me my paycheck. Fuck off, dude. Yeah, the two leads in this movie. Again, Sam is the bit more likable of the two, but Joe is the true asshole of the two. But they're both just they're not very likable. They're not good protagonists, in my opinion. Con number 4 is this movie is not paced very well. It doesn't really know whether it wants to be fast or it wants to be slow. The first act, all the way up until Gorgo is captured, is well paced and it is kind of engaging and it is entertaining. And I honestly would have liked the whole movie to just take place on this island where they capture Gorgo and they're about to take him back to civilization, but then Ogra shows up and they have to put up a fight against her. But that's not the case. So the first act is entertaining.
Really agree with that.
Huh?
I actually really agree with that.
The first act is entertaining. The second act drags like there's nobody's fucking business. It is so boring, slow, dull, drab, dreary, uninteresting, and not entertaining in the slightest. It's just lame. The third act is more entertaining than the second act, but it's also very rushed. Like, yeah, the final rampage with Ogra going through London is entertaining, but it takes too long and it's also rushed. This leads me into con number 5, I believe. The ending is very anticlimactic. Ogra shows up, took her 15 minutes of rampaging through a city to get to Gorgo, and then in 30 seconds flat, they're already going back into the ocean. Like, you couldn't at least show a couple establishing shots of the two monsters walking through destroyed London to get back to the ocean? Kind of just seems like she wades through London, grabs Gorgo, and then magically teleports back to the ocean. I kind of may suspect that there's some footage missing from this movie. And this leads me into con number 6. I think. Hang on. 6, 7, and 8 kind of go together in the same problem, but I'll just list them off. 6, 7, 8, it's too short. The film feels very disjointed, and there's a lack of monster action. I theorize this all is because of how choppy the editing is, especially in the third act, and the fact that it just feels kind of disjointed. You have the circus movie here, and then a Godzilla ripoff here. The film does feel very disjointed, and because of the lack of monster action, again, Gorgo literally destroys Nara Island in less than 30 seconds, tramples 2 islands, kills the harbor master, then goes back to the ocean, and then destroys 1 naval vessel, and then destroys London at the very end. I theorize that there may be some missing footage here. Like, maybe there was 10 to 15 minutes of footage that just for whatever reason got snipped out at the very last minute, and they kind of tried to pull a Justice League and throw this movie on screen. Honestly, if this movie was longer, they could have added more interesting fluff, like some more monster action, some more drama, some more character development to make this movie a little bit better. And as it currently stands, it's just very bland and dreary and drab and very uninteresting. Con number 9 is there's a lot of stock footage in this movie, like a lot of military stock footage of battleships and Navy patrol units and jet planes and mobile infantry with tanks and troops and such. I think there's like 10 minutes worth of stock footage in this movie. This movie is an hour and 6. I timed it exactly. 1 hour and 16 minutes and 45 seconds. I'd be willing to bet there's maybe about 10 to 12 minutes worth of stock footage in this whole movie. And it's also, as Trevor brought up, very piss poorly dubbed. There's a scene where a guy is saying maybe 3 or 4 words in a sentence, and he spews out 3 or 4 sentences that are like 10 to 12 words long. And you watch it, and it's so painful because it's so obviously dubbed and it's so piss poorly done. You're just like, what the fuck were they doing making this movie? Like, why? Why couldn't you just actually shoot somebody on a military set speaking off all this dialogue? Dubbing over stock footage sticks out like a sore thumb because it's so obviously dubbed, it takes you out of the movie.
I will say this in Reptilicus's favor, that the military scenes in that movie, they actually had the participation of the Denmark military.
Oh, so, yeah, Reptilicus had full cooperation with the Danish military, and it shows.
Yeah, indeed.
So I theorize they probably had zero cooperation with the British military with this movie, and that led to a shit ton of stock footage, and it's really, really jarring. Yet another reason why this movie feels very disjointed.
Yeah, it might have had to do with the fact that the city officials didn't want the London Bridge or Big Ben to be destroyed, because I know that for It Came From Beneath the Sea, Ray Harryhausen and everybody filming that movie, they had to kind of illegally film the San Francisco bridge scene because the city fathers thought that when people saw the movie, it would instill a lack of confidence in the integrity of the bridge. I mean, it's just a movie, but whatever.
Well, I mean, you ever see how strong an octopus is, normal sized?
True.
Whatever, though. Yeah, like Trev said, it's just a movie. And the last con that I have, con number 10. Oh my God. The blue screen effects in this movie are some of the absolute worst I have ever seen in my entire life. It's worse than the Mysterians. Shit you not. I feel like they may have been really proud of the fact that they had a blue screen to use, because they use the shit out of it. They use it at times where you really feel like, why did you use a blue screen? Why didn't you just actually shoot what you were doing? Like rowing a boat from ship to shore. You could have easily shot that yourself, but you had to use a blue screen. One minor moment that stuck out to me because it reminded me of Jaws 3D. When Joe and Sam are diving into the water near the beginning of the movie, because their rebreather units on their goggles are blue, there's a few shots where you can see the blue on their respirators bleeding through on the blue screen. And to that really, really stuck out to me in a negative way. There's a few blue screen shots that look okay. Usually it's in the third act when Gorgo's going on a rampage throughout London, partially because it's dark, and the red skies and the dark and the black of night kind of hides the fact that it's a blue screen. Like with Piccadilly Circus, it probably was a mix. That was some really good blue screen work. And seeing the London landscape with people running about and Gorgo rampaging in the background, that looks pretty decent. But they do a lot of daytime blue screen shots, and all of them look so bad. The blue screen is constantly eating through everything on screen, and there's lots of blue outlines on the moving human characters, and it really sticks out like a sore thumb. Yeah, all the blue screen effects, like 95% of the blue screen effects in this movie are just horrendous. This is probably, till now, the worst blue screen effects I've ever seen in a monster movie. Final thoughts, Trev?
Oh, I just thought it was funny how here towards the end we stopped calling her Agra and just called her Gorgo. I prefer to call her Mama Gorgo. But
oops.
Anyway, no, it's okay. My final thoughts, I think really what our problem with this movie, aside from really the execution, is that it has such a reputation about it that it created these expectations, or at least that's the way I feel. I think it could definitely benefit from a remake.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that will happen someday.
Yes.
There's a lot of there's a lot of potential here. Nick got into some stuff that I thought would be a good expansion, like maybe hanging on the island for a little bit longer, etc. But yeah, if you're a monster fan, I do think you should check this out and make up your own mind, because me and Nick don't make everybody's opinions for him. You can make up your own mind. But can I go ahead and give my final rating?
Sure, go ahead.
This is probably going to be a bit generous, but it is low for the ones I've done on here. Probably going to say maybe a 5 or 6, maybe 4 if I'm really in a bad mood about it. But I think there's some interesting ideas here. Actually, another thing that probably draws people to it, perhaps, is the fact that there's a bit of a novelty factor. There's not many British monster movies or giant monster movies, so people might be curious to check out and see how people outside of Japan handle the genre. So that might be it. But yeah, there's a lot working against this. It's not an easy sit. I always feel like I'm having to. It's almost a bit of a chore, kind of watching it. There are some things that I do find interesting, but I would like to see somebody try and do it again someday. So yeah, probably mid-range. I guess I'll say 5 for a final rating.
So my final thoughts, before I get to that, I want to list off a few ideas, like with my Son of Kong review. Like I said, I would want to give off my ways on how I would remake this movie. I would have hung on to the island a little longer. Honestly, a big thing I would have done, I kind of would have pulled a Gappa, and I would have kind of revealed that this monster has 2 parents. Gorgo gets captured. And Mama Gorgo shows up, tries to capture her, and there's a couple military vehicles that show up, and she has a fight with them. And I would have included a breath weapon, like fire or maybe radioactive fire. Whatever. Yeah, I would have just had fire breath. Screw it. So she would have had a fight with the military, and she would have been not killed, but defeated. So then baby Gorgo gets taken to civilization, and then after they leave, Daddy Gorgo shows up, and I would call him Ogar or something. So he shows up, revives her, and they both completely wipe out the village that baby Gorgo was captured on. And I would have also explained where the hell the monsters come from. I know they heavily imply in this movie that they were just awakened because of the undersea volcano, but they never say that. So I'm just like, at least give us a line to say, oh, these underwater monsters were awakened by the undersea volcano. But I would have explored that a little bit more, and I would have had both Ogra and Ogar completely wreck London shit and have a more involved fight with the military, like they're sweeping through tank brigades and actually leaping up and knocking down planes or shooting them down with their fire breath. And I would have had them capture Gorgo or like rescue Gorgo, and then as like a final ditch effort to stop them, there's a full-on brigade of tanks that try to stop them, but Ogra and Ogar just wipe them out and go back into the ocean, leaving the main human characters. And would have had one of the human characters be killed off too in the process. Like Gorgo himself tracks out Joe, let's just say, and eats him. So then Sam and Sean watch Gorgo, Ogra, and Ogar walk back into the ocean, humbled and freaked out and left with PTSD, saying, well, we fucked up there. And then end the film. My final thoughts. Huh?
that was another odd thing in that destruction scene, is that Joe was the one rescuing Sean. And I thought, it probably should have been Sam, seeing as how they had a bond going. But anyway.
My final thoughts on Gorgo. This is very much so the epitome of a paint-by-numbers monster movie. It's not technically a bad movie, but it's not a good movie either. And this was the first one of Super Kaiju Binge where I really feel like watching this movie really was a chore. And it shows due to the fact that I literally waited to the last minute to watch this movie before I did this review. So I apologize to anybody out there who is a big fan of this movie. I'm just not. I was not impressed by this movie. Was not blown away by it. There's a couple things to like about this movie, but overall, this is a pretty weak film in my opinion, which is why I will be giving it a very low score of a 3 out of 10. Sorry, but I'm not sorry. I just wasn't. I didn't dig this movie.
Yeah, it's just our opinion, folks.
Yep, exactly. So, Trev, you got anything to plug?
Well, someday, I'm not going to set a date because I never live up to it, or haven't yet. Someday, I'm going to get back to my collection on my channel, my YouTube channel, my Blu-ray collection. Yeah, I'm not going to make any promises because whenever it goes up, it goes up. So it is coming. I just don't know when. And also, I'm still writing for the Fictosphere. We're kind of in a dry spot at the moment. But, yeah, check me out on my channel and over at the Fictosphere.
Please do. Look forward to future episodes of Super Kaiju Binge. And now that we've left the 50s and we've kind of had a bit of a dud start to the 60s, now we're getting into the really good stuff. So tune in next week when Shawnee Boy and I discuss the original 60s classic, the original Mothra. So check out Trevor's channel. Go check out the Fictosphere and look forward to more episodes of Super Kaiju Binge. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. And share this video with your friends. Go and check out Jacksonite Productions official, my official YouTube, Facebook fan page. And post videos, post discussions. Give yourself some free promotion. And be the nerd that you want to be. And as always, go out and if you discover a new species of giant dino crocs, leave them alone. Just going to bite you in the ass. And I will see you guys in the next video.